through 3 parts of what it means to live an everyday prophetic lifestyle. We're going to learn, how do we hear God's voice? We're going to learn, how do we share what God is saying with others? And how do we steward what God has said to us? And the fun part about this is we're not just going to stay in like theory. We are actually going to take time in our service every week to practice. We're going to take time to pause, to listen, to reflect. We're going to respond, because we're not just learning something new in theory in our heads. We want to have this be an experience that we become familiar with, that we just do some reps. This is not about performance, it's about practice. It's about learning how to hear God's voice, share what he's saying, and steward what he's saying to us. Here's something that I deeply believe, and it's that most people don't need to be taught how to hear God. They need to be given permission to believe that they already do hear God. So that's where we're going to start, with the voice of God, not the like booming movie trailer voice of God. But we are going to start with the personal, present, creative voice of God that is speaking. He's speaking to you consistently, and he just wants our attention to be focused on him so that we learn how to recognize it's actually him talking. So we are not trying to get and convince God to speak to us. Let me just tell you, by your posture, by your behavior, you cannot convince God to speak to you. God is already speaking. What we're doing is we're learning how to recognize, oh, this is how you communicate. This is how you operate. And again, the prayer by the end of this morning is that you feel an increased sense of confidence when you ask the question that says, God, what do you want me to know? You feel an increased sense of confidence that you will actually be able to recognize what God wants you to know in that particular moment, in that particular time, okay? When we grow in our confidence that we actually do know how to hear God's voice, you will often be surprised at how often he is speaking to you in everyday, ordinary moments, and you'll be surprised at what he wants to say to you, about how he wants to speak to not only the big, life-changing things, but how he wants to just speak to your day-to-day, how he wants to encourage you, how he wants, when you're feeling low, to give you a word that helps you go, all right, okay, I'm going to make it. When you're worried, he wants to speak something to you or show you something that is going to have a sense of peace settle on you. God is constantly speaking to us, and we want to learn how to recognize that voice. He's not just speaking to pastors, leaders, prophets, spiritual elites. He's speaking to every single one of us. You know, one of the things that's going to be really cool this morning is we are going to practice together, all individually hearing God. And what you're going to see is that, I don't know, there's a couple hundred people in the room. Guess, I'm not great at judging that, but there's a few of us in here. And when we stop and practice, here's what's going to happen, is God is going to speak to individuals at the exact same time. And he's going to be speaking to just you and to just them at the same time. Isn't that amazing? That's hard for us to wrap our head around, but we're about to experience it. And that's going to be very, very cool. We're going to look at Luke chapter 24 to get started, and it's a really fun passage that we're looking at. A little backstory to it. Jesus has been crucified, and he has already risen from the dead. And 2 of his followers We're not sure who they were or how close they were to him, but they were followers of the way of Jesus, are walking home, and, you can imagine they're a touch confused, they're hurting, and they're just trying to figure out how do we make sense of all that has just happened in the last week? You got to remember, Jesus rode in on a donkey, and then just days later, he's hanging on a cross. His followers are shell-shocked at what has happened. And so it says in Luke chapter 24, beginning in verse 13, "Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with him, but they were kept from recognizing him." So Jesus shows up, and they don't even realize that it's him. And look what he does next. He doesn't show off. He doesn't do something flamboyant to prove himself. He just starts talking. And beginning with Moses and all of the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all of the scriptures concerning himself. They still don't know it's him, but some things beginning to happen. It says in verse 32, after he had left, they asked each other, "Were our hearts not burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" Here's a question for us today. What if your heart has already been burning? What if God has already been speaking, walking, explaining things to you, and you just didn't know it was him? Maybe no one gave you permission to say the way that you are wired to naturally, most instinctively hear the voice of God is not necessarily that you've been taught, hey, that's how God speaks. What if how you operate is actually coded by God so that you could recognize his voice? And no one's just given you permission to say, oh, that's actually hearing God. That's actually recognizing him. Now let's pair this with one of Jesus' clearest things that he said to us about speaking. In John chapter 10, it says, "The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. And when he has brought all his own, he goes ahead of them, and his sheep follow him." Why? Because they know his voice. They don't follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they don't recognize the stranger's voice. Jesus says, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me." Here's the encouraging thing. Jesus doesn't say, "My sheep will eventually learn how to hear my voice." He says, "My sheep listen to my voice. They know my voice." You were created to hear the voice of God. You were created to recognize his voice. And yes, it will take practice. Like learning how anybody and you interact and relate together takes practice. Very few times do we just fall into step and understand exactly what someone means all the time in our communication. That's not how it works. Time, proximity, relationship, connection. You have to learn some of those things. It's about recognizing for us today that God is already speaking. And when we say the phrase hearing God, a lot of us, we think, all right, am I hearing some audible voice? Am I, having some radical encounter? What is that supposed to mean? And one of the most helpful shifts for me in this is realizing that God is not limited to one communication channel. Like, he's a creator. He's a creative God. And so he doesn't just use one medium. There's actually an organization here in the Austin area called the Prophetic Company, and they do a lot of training and teaching people on how to hear God's voice and respond to it. A lot of stuff that we're going to be talking about today, they do at a way deeper, in-depth level. And I've been able to sit with them and learn from some of their teachings, and it's been really helpful. And one of the things that they've helped me see is that God, we have senses. You know, you don't just have ears. You have eyes. You can smell things. You can feel things. And so here's some of the things that in diving into to learning and practicing that I've learned from the Prophetic Company. And one of the things they said is, hey, we hear with all of our senses. So first, we hear. We can, what does that feel like? Sometimes it's like you just catch a phrase. Like there's just a phrase that pops in your head. Maybe it's a verse, maybe it's a lyric of a song, and it just catches with you. We can hear it. It feels like we're kind of maybe hearing it even in our heart, is what it can be like. We can see, not just dreams and visions, but everyday things. Maybe it also is just like a mental snapshot of something. We can see, and God can speak to us through that. Through our emotions, we can feel. Sometimes it's a physical sensation. Here's a fun one. More than 20 years ago, I was in a church service and got offered to be prayed for healing. It was very brand new for me, and my body was physically healed. And what I've noticed over the last 20 years of walking with Jesus is that when I'm in environments where God wants me to pray for someone else to be healed, that same place where I was healed will start to hurt. And I'm like, oh, that was healed. It took me about a decade to realize that was God. No, I'm not joking. Like, for a long time, I would feel that and be like, oh man, did God not really heal me? And then after a while, I realized, oh, no. God, you're using that to remind me of what it was like to be healed. Is there someone around me that needs to be prayed for? Because you want to heal them too. And as I've learned how to respond to that part of God's voice, I've been able to walk with him in what he is already wanting to do. It's just one of the other ways he speaks. There's a knowing. Have you ever experienced this? It's just like sometimes you get like this flash of clarity, this certainty, where you're just like, I know this is what we're supposed to do. And there's a confidence about it. There's a peace about it. It's part of God speaking to you. See, and here's the thing, you probably have one of these that you naturally lean to. That you find when I'm trying to hear God, when I'm trying to figure out, God, what do you want me to do with my life? How do you want me to respond to this situation? It probably comes up in one of these more often than the other. Just like we all have things that we do naturally. This is the same way. But just because we do something naturally doesn't mean it's the only way that we can do something. We can learn how to do things another way. So let me give you a fun example of that. My natural leaning when it comes to communication is with words. That's how I normally talk to my kids. I use words. I don't use sign language. I don't know sign language, except for one form, and it's a made-up form, but me and my youngest son, we have this made-up language. Actually, we think it's the language of all men, and it comes in 4 nods of the head. And so let me walk you through them right now, just so you understand what happens. The first is the head nod up. Give the head nod up. Okay, that is for someone you know. You're saying, what's up? I see you. May not be able to talk to you right now, but I see you. Then there's the head nod down. A little more respectful. I may not know you very well, But I acknowledge you. You give the head nod to an elder, to someone who's older than you, maybe someone you respect. They give you the head nod down. Then there's a head nod to the left. You know what that means? Did you see that? You see that? Something weird's happening. Check that out. We don't have to say anything. We both see it. It's that weird thing that's taking place. And then there's the head nod right. Hey, come here. Come here. We got to talk. While I might normally speak to him in words, he gives me one of those and I give him one of those, we know exactly what we're talking about. We know exactly what needs to happen. Why? It's because we have proximity. We have trust. We have time together. We've learned this. And this is how it works with God too. You might feel something. You might see something. You might sense something. And it won't always make sense right away. It's about the proximity and the time in with God, learning how to recognize what he sounds like, what his voice stirs within you. When you feel a sense, it's learning to recognize if what is stirring in you is deep anxiety, you learn to recognize, okay, that's not the voice of God. I actually need to invite the voice of God in because he is called the Prince of Peace. And we see him calm storms throughout the scriptures. Okay, when this thing stirs up within me, okay, I can then go, okay, that is not the Spirit of God stirring up anxiety and fear in me that is making me feel stuck. No, God is actually wanting to come combat that with something that he wants to speak. He wants to diffuse that feeling through either a word, something I see, maybe it's just a settling that he wants to do. It's learning how to practice that so we recognize that God, you are speaking all the time. You're speaking through the various senses, impressions, nudges, all the things. So again, here's going back to that core belief I have. Most of us don't need to be taught how to hear God. We need permission to believe that God is already speaking to us. And we need time with him to discern what his voice is like. We're going to practice here because I think let's get out of theory and let's just start practicing this. And because I want us to see this is not like pizzazz. It's not a flash. I mean, look, 99 times out of 100, when God speaks to you, it is very normal. It feels like it's just in the flow of what you normally do and live. I mean, for me, I'm still waiting for one of those writing on the wall moments. That's never happened. Most of the time, it's just been normal. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to lead you in just a simple exercise. David, you can even go ahead and throw up the steps for all the people that need to know what we're about to do so that you know it's not weird, okay? We're simply going to ask the question, God, what do you want me to know? And as we do this together, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to lead you in and I'll explain the steps and then we'll do it together. We're going to close our eyes, not because there's something magical that happens when we close our eyes. What it does is it just helps us focus a little bit, tune out some distractions. We're going to take a deep breath, and then we're going to ask that question. God, what do you want me to know? And then we're just going to sit in silence for a little bit and let God speak to us. It might be just like a voice that sounds like it's in your heart. It might be a thought. It might be a feeling that comes over your body. You might see something or hear something. Just let's practice, okay? So let's go ahead and let's close our eyes. Let's take that deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Remember, this is not about getting something right. This is just about being present with him. Now just ask him to yourself, God, What do you want me to know? You don't have to evaluate anything right now. Just receive. Okay, now let's take a moment and we're just going to say thank you. The God of all the universe spoke to you. And if you don't feel like you got anything real clear, that's fine. This is practice. No one's performing here. We're just saying, Father, I want to know what you want to say to me. I just want to hear you. Okay, so here, I'm giving you some homework today. So your weekly practice is to simply ask that question multiple times throughout your day. And I want to encourage you to ask it in different settings. Ask it while you're doing a devotional and sitting quietly before the Lord. Ask it while you're on a walk. Ask it as you're getting ready to put kids to bed. Just ask the question, God, what do you want me to know? And even practice using different senses. Just like, all right, God, I want to hear you. Go outside and just say, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to listen to nature. And whatever I hear, I'm then going to say, God, what do you want me to know through that? Sounds a little mystical, but it's really actually incredibly fun. We're going to do another activation here in just a minute about that. But before we do, let me tell you a quick story, just to show I'm learning how to do this too. Earlier this spring, I was in Colorado, and I was skiing with some friends from work, and we were doing like a half company retreat, half fun hangout. And we're at the house, and we're all talking, and we get on a subject where I'm the least experienced guy in the room. And you ever been there when you're around a bunch of people that are your peers, but they're talking about something that you're not well versed in? And you start to feel that insecurity rise up of like, I'm an idiot. I'm the stupidest person here. What am I doing here? And you just start to feel all those things. And that's exactly what was happening to me. And so I just went outside, stepped away from the conversation quietly, went outside and just, began to let God know how big of a failure that I was and how awful, and I can't believe, look at me. God. And he's like, hey, slow your roll, buddy. He just said, hey, will you just listen? I was like, okay, I'll listen. And right when I said, yes, I will listen, immediately what I start hearing is this chipmunk. Because in Colorado, they have chipmunks, not just squirrels. And this chipmunk is scurrying around, and I can hear it rustling through the trees. And it goes on for about 3 minutes. And I'm like, okay, cool. God, what do you want me to know? He's like, I want you to keep listening. It's like, all right, cool. I'll try to listen. I said, yes, I will listen. And as soon as I say, yes, I will listen, the chipmunk stops. It was strange. And then this bird started singing. And it just sang for about 5 minutes. And then it just stopped, and I said, okay, what do you want me to know, God? And he said, which one would you rather be? Would you rather be the chipmunk that scurries, or would you rather be the bird that sings knowing it's going to be taken care of. It was what I needed in that moment. And I heard God through the sounds of nature. And then he spoke to me about what I needed to hear. So, have you ever seen anything that just like stuck in your mind? Maybe it's like a phrase from a billboard, or even just like a scene from nature, even the way someone you saw, or the way they were moving, it just stuck with you and you couldn't shake it. Through our eyes, we can listen through our eyes. We can listen to God through our eyes. God can speak to us through the things around us. Sometimes it's subtle, but it's him. And that's what we're going to practice here in just a moment, is listening to God through our eyes. What this is, again, is it's just training our senses and getting in some practice reps. The reason we're practicing in church is because we're supposed to be learning how to do this together in community. This is about learning how to follow Jesus. We want to hear him, respond to him, obey him. And part of that is learning how to recognize his voice. And so the safest place to practice doing that should be right here. To say, I am going to practice this. And I may not feel very good at it, but I'm still going to practice. There's a cool passage in Jeremiah chapter 1 where God says to Jeremiah, "What do you see?" And listen to what Jeremiah says. He says, "I see the branch of an almond tree." Sounds deep, doesn't it? I like, wow. You know what? Revelation just exploded on the world with that one. And God replies, "You have seen correctly. For I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled." He went on to share more with Jeremiah, but he just simply said, "What do you see?" Well, I see a branch. What do you hear? I hear a squirrel. It didn't get a vision. You know, sometimes God just gives us a question. Listen, what do you hear? What do you see? So let's do this. Let's do practice round number 2, okay? And this one, I bet, is going to be a stretch for almost all of us, okay? So can we all just realize, hey, this is probably something I've never done, and I'm almost certain we've never done it in a church service. We are going to practice listening to God through our eyes. So we're going to keep our eyes open this time. And what I want you to do is I want you to just start looking around the room. It's not the most flamboyant room in the world. There's not a whole lot to see, but just look around the room, and the first thing that your eye just catches on, it could be another person, you know, it could be one of the lights. Just let your eyes roam and stop looking at me and just look around. You get to make some noise, it's fine. And if something catches your eye, just ask the question, God, what do you want me to know through what I see? If God was speaking to you through that exercise, that's awesome. If he wasn't, don't beat yourself up. You know, what I noticed was there's a piece of tape here on the floor. And I was like, oh, it feels like it's splitting the room in half. You know, and I think that's how a lot of us feel when it comes to this kind of stuff. There's the haves and the have-nots. Which side am I on? Am I someone that hears God? Am I someone that's not? Tate, will you do me a favor and just pull that up? I don't know if we're allowed to do it, but we're going to do it. I'll bring Tate next week because it's a prophetic act. just look at Tate. He's pulling up that tape. Here. Thanks, dude. If you feel like you're a have-not, look, I don't know how to hear God. God doesn't speak to me. I'm not very good at this. There is no dividing line. We are sons and daughters of the Most High God. He's not just our King, He's our Father. And He's a Father that wants to speak to us, that wants to lead us, that wants to nurture us, wants to encourage us in every way. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. Jesus did not say my prophets, my pastors, my leaders. He said my sheep. And that's all of us. It's part of the normal life of walking with Jesus. Is God, you are speaking to me. The question that we need to go forward with is, God, what do you want me to know? Not, God, will you speak to me? But God, what do you want me to know? Because He already wants you to know things. So here's what we're going to do this week. We're going to get some more reps in. Because next week, we're going to talk about how do we share with others what God's been saying to us. And so we want to practice listening this week. So what I want you to do throughout this week is just ask that question multiple times throughout your day. God, what do you want me to know? Ask while you're driving, ask while you're doing dishes, as you go to the grocery store, staring out a window, watching your kids play, while you read the headlines. Just say, God, what do you want me to know? Try listening with your eyes again. Try going outside and just sitting still and letting the sounds around you be something that God speaks to you with. Pay attention to what you feel in your body and say, okay, God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to know? God is not looking for spectacular moments to speak to you. He is saying, I am speaking. I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Pay attention. Listen. Slow down enough to know that I want to talk to you. He wants to talk to you. We're not going to try to manufacture anything. We are just going to spend time training our senses to recognize what God is already doing, because He is speaking to you and we are simply learning how to listen. Okay, we're gonna close here. I'm gonna pray for us, and we're gonna sing and worship a little bit more. A couple practicals. If you need prayer for anything today, we are going to have some of our staff, some of our elders, some of our training school graduates, life group leaders. Let's get half a dozen or so people down here to pray for others. If you came in with anything that's just a burden in your life, maybe it's financial, physical, emotional, whatever it is, when we stand and the band leads us in a song, I want you to just come and let someone carry that burden with you. Pray for you and encourage you. So why don't you stand with me and I'll pray. And if you need prayer for anything, leaders, if you want to pray for people this morning, go ahead and come on down right now as I pray. God, we are so thankful that you are here. Thank you for the different ways that you have spoken already this morning. And God, I pray that you would help us to be reminded that your voice is active right here, right now, and everywhere we go. We love you, Jesus. We're thankful for the Holy Spirit moving in our lives. Let's worship together.